Hi, Maryland. This is County Council member Wanika Fisher from the Prince George's County Council. You're tuned in to the Conduit Street Podcast, your inside track on county government.
Hello and welcome to the Conduit Street Podcast. Kevin Kinnally here with Michael Sanderson. Michael, this is not the episode I thought we were going to record this week, but here we are.
Well, I'm happy to be back on the pod with you, Kevin. I like the two of us getting through a topic, but yeah, this one sort of landed in our lap. And when we pivot to a special episode and feel like, okay, this is what we need to talk about this week, it's because something happened, right?
Yeah, something definitely happened. It's in the news. I'm sure most of our listeners have heard about it. The Maryland State Board of Elections recently announced a vendor issue involving mail-in ballots for the June 23rd gubernatorial primary. Some voters received the wrong party ballot, and now the state is sending replacement ballots to everyone who has received a mail-in ballot prior to the mistake being discovered.
Right. And this news sort of broke pretty quickly just over the last few days. And, you know, we hear from our elected officials and our managers in county government, and understandably, county folks are getting questions. If you're a county commissioner or county exec, you're getting questions from your residents. And I think, you know, like the county administrators, I had a meeting with them earlier this week, and this was on their minds too. So, you know, we wanted to walk through some of the nuts and bolts here with a county audience in mind, but also this is just a topic that, like, everybody deserves some good coverage on where we are.
And we actually just wrapped up a MACO membership meeting with State Administrator Jared Demarinis. So I think it's timely, and we wanted to spend a few minutes walking through where things stand and maybe separate facts from confusion just a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. So hats off for that outreach and engaging with counties, even though this isn't exactly our bag. But let's start there. You know, seems to me, I mean, you and I are both present on social media, and you're probably seeing the same thing I am, that there's a fair number of people out there saying, oh my gosh, the whole system's broken. This is a nightmare.
Yeah, a fair number of people, including the president of the United States, right? And the first thing I'd say is this: people hear, you know, quote unquote, election issue and immediately think county government or county officials are somehow involved or control this process. But that's not actually how Maryland's system works. I know we talk a lot about elections and counties are certainly involved, but Michael, kind of walk through where counties are involved and where they aren't when it comes to stuff like this.
Right. I think that, like, structure of government stuff is boring but useful, and especially in a case like this. So I suspect many people are familiar that their county government funds the Board of Elections locally. You have the Talbot County Board of Elections, and there's an election administrator in Talbot County and one for each of our jurisdictions. So there's money in your county budget. It's one of the things that your local taxes are supporting. This is a fairly common system, though, across Maryland for different functions, that the state sort of sets up the architecture and in many cases does the overall policy and guidance. The funding comes in part or entirely from county governments. So elections are one of those spaces where this is a state agency that's funded in part but not really managed by county government. So bottom line here for the issue of the moment is the county governments, we don't print ballots, we don't mail ballots, nor do we, like, the voter registration process or the various, like, vendors who are involved in things like printing and distributing and so forth. All those are state level relationships, not county by county.
Right. And the process you just described makes sense, right? When you're dealing with something like an election, you can't have 24 different counties doing it 24 different ways, right? There needs to be uniformity. So the state kind of controls, like you said at the top, the vendors that everyone uses. They control the printing of the ballots. And that is so that, you know, things are uniform and we have a uniform process. But the vendor process specifically, Michael, does sit with the State Board of Elections. This is a statewide issue. And the state board made a statewide decision to send out these replacement ballots. And of course, that's getting a lot of attention.
Right. So that's basically the first thing to talk about is the remedy for what went wrong. That we had a number of Maryland voters who had asked for a mail-in ballot and received one, and in some cases they were, I guess, ballots printed for the wrong political party. So
Mhm.
you're on Team Red and you got a ballot for Team Blue, or vice versa. But I guess like the resolution here is we're going to mail out replacement ballots to voters who had asked for one. So like I guess that's where we start. Let's talk through why is that the remedy here.
Right. And I think that the explanation that Administrator Demarinis gave to our folks made sense, even if the State Board of Elections, which they do, believe that most voters got the
Yeah.
correct ballot, the vendor could not confidently isolate exactly who received correct ballots and who didn't. So instead of trying to thread that needle, they decided to replace ballots for everybody in the affected group. And I think, that's in the name of transparency and not wanting to roll the dice on something so significant and important. If the vendor wasn't 100%, if everyone wasn't on the same page, they were going to just the whole kit and caboodle, make sure that everyone gets a new ballot. And of course, that does, create some confusion and some questions during that process. But I think that was the reason, is so that they could exactly make sure that everyone had a correct ballot when they mail it in or drop it in a ballot drop box.
Yeah, I confess that the first time I heard the plan was to send a new ballot to everybody, to the whole list. It felt, I don't know, kind of dramatic or maybe too much.
Mhm.
But after hearing the logic for it, I mean, trusting that we'll just send it to the people who got the wrong ballot, that sort of leaves open another avenue for a mistake.
Mhm.
What if some people who got the wrong initial ballot don't get the replacement? That like introduces more uncertainty in the process. So I don't know. I guess I come out on the back end after hearing about it. It does feel like it's the cleaner option. Just tell everybody, dump the first ballot, use the second ballot, and we'll put the right codes on it. So all we're going to take are going to be the second round ballots. That makes sense, I guess.
Right. So, I mean, we work closely, obviously, with the State Board of Elections, and we have relationships with them. So, Jared had reached out and told me that's what they were going to do. I think before they kind of made it public. And to me, I agree with you. My first thought was it seems a little bit over the top, but once you get the explanation and once you understand why, I do think it makes sense. Again, if you're trying to preserve confidence in the process, eliminate doubt, and avoid confusion later, I think the idea was you go broad and you make sure that everyone affected has the right ballot. And if you're not 100% sure that you could identify exactly who got the wrong ballot, then to me, I do agree that it makes sense to just make sure everybody affected or not affected is receiving the correct ballot and votes the correct ballot.
Right, right. So I guess another related issue here, and forgive me for being like putting on the Mako or the county hat, but I mean, this is our pod, right? It's fair to do that. But like the next question is, I guess, the obvious one to ask with these nuts and bolts. Does this allow someone who received two ballots to send them both in and effectively vote twice? I mean, are we leaving the door open for that?
So the short answer is no.
Right.
And I know, and I think there was a lot of talk about that, but Maryland has safeguards built into the system. Ballots and return materials have identifiers which are tied to voters, and our election officials track ballots through the process. So the replacement ballot becomes the ballot that counts. And so essentially those ballots that went out previously, they're null and void. And if someone does vote twice, if they send both ballots back, the one that is not official will be discarded by the State Board of Elections. So the answer is no. They do have unique identifiers on these ballots, and they can tell when they were sent, to whom they were sent, and return the whole way they could track it. So the answer is no. There are safeguards in place to make sure that that doesn't happen.
So, I mean, all right, that sounds like the right
Right.
answer, right?
Right.
Like you sort of dot the I's and cross the T in this process, and that's a little less exciting than what the conversation on social media would like it to be, I suppose. But
Right.
I,
I mean,
I
and
mean,
that's true, right? Nobody wants to hear, "Oh, don't worry, we already have procedures for this." But sometimes having boring process is good. Look, you and I, we've sat through hours and hours and hours of meetings that seem perfunctory and all these process things that get worked out in legislation and through regulation. And this is one of those times where that work, sitting through all those hours and working through all these technical issues comes to fruition, right? And there are processes for this. They're in place. So I know there are questions. I know that for some people it might not make sense, but I trust the process, and I do trust our state board of elections to do the right thing here and make sure. And obviously, there are tons of eyeballs now on the state, and so I think there will be a lot of transparency moving forward, and it will be a very public process.
That makes sense. So one more thing that came up, and forgive me as I put on the Mako or the county hat a little bit here, but another question came up today and did strike me as like, who's paying for all this? Mailing out a whole new batch of ballots to all these voters. We're talking, tens of thousands for sure. I don't know what the total number is, hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
of ballots, I suspect. Who's paying for the new mailing here?
Right, and that is important because counties do cover a lot of the costs tied to elections, as we've already said. So the vendor is covering all the costs related to this error and the replacement effort. And again, that is important because Mako has been very vocal when it comes to the cost split for how the state funds elections between the state and the county governments. And counties do share certain election system costs under Maryland law, and that does include ballot printing and related election expenses. So we don't control the process, but we get the bill for half of it, right? So
Yeah.
we know now, after talking to State Administrator Demarinis, that counties should not suddenly expect an additional bill tied to these replacement ballots. And I think if that were the case, Mako would be very vocal again in making sure that the state pays for this, or someone other than county governments pay for this. So it sounds like the vendor has agreed that they're going to cover all the costs here. So good news, at least for county governments. You won't be getting an unexpected bill for something that you had no process in or no control over.
Right. So agreed with that on the back end. I mean, this is a quirky area. It wasn't that long ago for like the 2020 election, and even in 22, where we had some different processes, more mail-in ballots and so forth. And I'm trying to remember the details, but Maryland went through a process where I think every voter received a note indicating you can use this process to request a mail-in ballot if you do so. And we had some back and forth with the state of who was responsible for what cost there. So there's some history here of mailings and administrative costs being sort of split between the state and the counties. But if you're in a county finance office, I think you may have just dialed down a little notch of anxiety hearing that this is a vendor responsibility, not our counties. And even if you're just concerned on behalf of Maryland taxpayers,
Sure.
like this is going to be another $1 million expense. Now the vendor dropped the ball. They're going to cover these costs. That's a good outcome.
Yeah, I think so, right? And I think, again, the vendor agreeing that they're going to cover the cost is a good thing, one less thing to worry about. But look, $1 million in the environment that we're in, whatever the cost is, we don't know. But anything is significant. And I think, yeah, for county governments and for taxpayers alike, it sounds like the vendor is going to take care of it, and that's a good thing. We need to unravel exactly what happened, and I'm sure there'll be a process for that, kind of a post-mortem on what exactly happened here. But for now, we don't need to worry about the state or the county governments absorbing these costs.
Right. So I guess, to some degree, we pull together the discussions on this podcast for our county constituents, for the people who are managing and operating county governments and that sort of stuff. And they want to know these inside baseball questions. But, I've got family members, and this has come up in group chats and probably on people's Nextdoor pages and stuff like that. So if someone listening right now just got one of these replacement ballots, what are they supposed to do?
Well, number one, use the replacement ballot. So don't send back the original one. There are detailed instructions that are included with the replacement ballot package. So the short answer is discard your original ballot and then send back the replacement ballot. And again, there will be significant markings on the replacement ballot to make clear that this is the replacement ballot. This is the ballot you should mail in. And the state board is directing folks to just go ahead and destroy that original ballot. And again, they do have safeguards in place to prevent people from sending in both and having both counted.
So I think that's good to underscore that point. That's the process that Maryland voters are being asked to follow through on, and you're going to get the details and so forth. It's going to be mailed out to you in a follow-up item with a lot of clear marking and directions. So I feel like it's important for folks to get that right. I guess on process, like you work in the election space with our local administrators, and you're involved on state legislation that affects all this kind of stuff. I would say given that there was this problem, I think the state election administrator pretty quickly responding and saying, okay, counties are among the people that I need to be talking to. So he's made himself available publicly and that sort of stuff, but also, run a meeting with county stakeholders, take their questions and kind of walk through these nuts and bolts. I think that's the right way to go about this.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's important, and I think he recognizes that the state board members recognize that look, let's be honest, this is not an ideal time where we are as a country to have questions about elections integrity, even if again this is a vendor issue, it's going to be rectified. I'm very confident in that, but even to have a sniff of something going wrong in the space of elections is just not ideal for our nation right now, and especially for Maryland. So I think that is the right thing to do, get out in front of it, talk to people, explain exactly what happened. And I do agree that he did a good job with that. Making sure that we have all the questions again, because understandably, people are going to their elected officials, especially county governments, which are closest to our residents. They have questions. Oftentimes, the first place they're going to go is to the county or to someone that they know, an elected official, someone that they trust locally. And I think they recognized, the state board did, that it was really important that counties had the right information, the most accurate information, and kudos for that.
Right, right. So, without a doubt, there are people making phone calls to County Executive Brave Boy's office and saying, "What the heck is going on? What am I supposed to do? What's happening here?" And that sort of thing. So, I mean, our folks. I mean, timing's a big part of this too. Like we want to know what's going on right away.
Right.
And even if not every I is dotted and T is crossed in the entirety of this process, the quick reach out to kind of settle our stomachs and then a resource to follow up, that's totally the right way to do it. Yeah.
Right. And so if there are people looking for updates or trying to follow along with everything we've talked about, there is a specific special webpage now that the State Board of Elections has created with information and frequently asked questions. They'll continue updating that as things move forward. So we'll link to that website, of course, in the show notes so that people can easily access and, again, get the most up-to-date information. You should follow the State Board of Elections. They are the trusted source, also your local boards of election. But there is now this dedicated webpage that people can easily navigate to and get the latest on exactly what's going on. So we'll link that in the notes.
Right. So, I mean, like in addition to just these nuts and bolts kind of comments, I mean, as mentioned, we're both on social media a lot, and this topic has kind of taken on its own life a little bit in the last few days. I think it's worth at least sort of a glance in the direction of the people who are saying, "Oh, this is the smoking gun." See, we're starting to see how someone cheats in the election by using a machine or using some system or the mail-in ballot or whatever. I mean, I'll just say, knowing what we know about this situation, I don't see how this is evidence of any of that kind of stuff. I mean, first of all, most obviously, this is the primary election, right?
That was
in June.
Exactly.
So this is the parties sorting out who will be their candidate for various offices for the general election that comes months from now. I mean, I can't find any through line from some gaggle of blue voters who get red ballots or vice versa to, oh, here we go. Now the outcomes are all going to get skewed in favor of the team who pulled all the levers behind the scenes. Like I don't find any fire there, even if some people are seeing or smelling smoke. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think that last point there, that number one, this is the primary election. So, I mean, for the people out there stirring the pot and saying that this is fraudulent or this is some attempt by whomever to do whatever, this is a primary election. And in Maryland, I think that it's pretty clear that this is not the way that you'd want to do anything that would actually change the outcome of any election. So that's number one. This is not a general election, it's a primary election. But even that aside, I think that in a vacuum, this is, this happens. These things happen with vendors. There are errors. This happens a lot across the board in the public and the private sector. In a vacuum, this was, it was disclosed right away. There's a very public process to fix it and clean it up. There's a dedicated web page. There's all kind of materials going out to voters. So in a vacuum, I think, okay, understandable. We could see how this could happen. But in the environment that we're in, where, elections are under so much scrutiny, and we have a hard time now getting anyone to show up at the local board of elections and run the show because they're dealing with threats and all these crazy things out there that are going on in our country. It magnifies it, to the nth degree. And we see all this stuff on social media and the bots and all this just noise. It is concerning. And I think it adds another layer of uncertainty to an already very uncertain process when it comes to managing the election and making sure that everyone can cast their ballot and it's fair and it's accurate. So I don't think this is, I agree with you. This is not any kind of smoking gun. There's nothing nefarious here. And look, again, it was a public cleanup. It's very quick. And to me, it points as a hiccup and not some scheme that some people claim that it is. So it feels very clear to me that it's a hiccup. It's going to be resolved, and we'll be able to move forward.
Right. We all have a great stake in our elections being run fairly and transparently. So like we're all on board with that as the end goal. And the means to do that, like this is not ideal, but everything about the resolution points in the direction of we're going to get it right. And that's what you want. So I think it was worth it, Kevin, to take, sort of like set aside our conversation topics that we had planned on, and let's dive into this one topic for this week. And hopefully this conversation clears up some confusion, like between this podcast and the election administrator meeting directly with county leaders and going through this sort of stuff, and the public effort he's making and the special website, all that collectively can help sort of clear up confusion. So we've got a plan that sounds like it ought to resolve the problem of the moment. It's nice to hear that the vendor who made the error and dropped the ball is going to absorb the costs of the fix. There shouldn't be any bearing from this on who wins the elections in either June nor November. And kind of for inside baseball purposes, while your county government oversees and funds the voting process, this particular thing was a state function. We're just kind of caught up in it. So I think those are our takeaways, right?
Really well said. And to be clear, everyone should be concerned anytime there is any kind of issue or hiccup when it comes to elections. We all have a great stake, as you said, but let's dial it back and make sure that everyone's on the same page and we're talking about exactly what happened in the remedy here. So certainly it's important. Everyone has the right and should ask questions. Our local boards of elections are certainly asking questions and trying to iron this all out. But at the end of the day, I think you cleared it up well, Michael, and kind of explained the county role here, what people should and shouldn't expect. And of course, we'll link all of the important documents to the show notes. And Michael, I'll say that this is certainly going to come up at the Mako Summer Conference. We already had scheduled a session on elections. There's so much uncertainty, as I said earlier, with court rulings and the federal administration and state governments. There's just a lot going on. This is just another layer. So we're going to have this conversation at the Mako Summer Conference. Don't miss it.
Right on.
All right, we'll go ahead and leave it here for today. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe. That way, all of these episodes are sent directly to the device of your choice. You can also follow along on social media, Facebook, Twitter. And then, of course, we have coverage on the Conduit Street blog on this and all the important issues of the moment. But for now, for Michael Sanderson and our esteemed producer, Chantal Malcolm Lim, this is Kevin Kinnally signing off, and we will talk to you soon.